Let's bring on the Mountaineers. Goes around about the 50, the 10 to 5. A touchdown with Virginia. He did it.
He did it. That's with White. Beavers and he's gone. Touchdown. Tavon Austin.
As the hills of West Virginia resound with the sounds of Golden Blue football.
They want to have a 7-on-7 drill. We want to make it a fist fight. Nothing cheap, nothing dirty, but West Virginia football.
From the heart. Streaming. It's Mountaineer pride. Leave no doubt tonight. No doubt. They shouldn't have played the old Golden Blue.
West Virginia is a special place. People of the state that have great pride in this WV logo.
Ain't no stopping the Golden Blue.
It is a great night to be a Mountaineer wherever you may be.
And now it's the show brought to you by Mountaineer fans for Mountaineer fans, the Country Roads webcast. What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome into Season 6, Episode 167 of the CRW podcast here for our Texas Tech Preview and Predictions edition. Of course, I will be joined by my co-host Steven later in the show, and we'll get into the matchups with the Red Raiders, provide our key to victory and our score predictions for the game before taking a look around the Big 12 and predicting some other games from around the conference in Week 4, as a lot of Big 12 action will be on the slate with conference play beginning for a lot of teams, including our beloved Mountaineers here as they kick off the 2023 season of Big 12 conference play with a matchup with the 1-2 Texas Tech Red Raiders, West Virginia entering the game at 2-1, and there are plenty of storylines to discuss and plenty of matchups to divulge into as we continue throughout the show. But before we get there, let's kick this off with our opening segment here on the Country Roads webcast. How about a little bit of Mountaineer news? All right, couple of things to cover here in Mountaineer news. First of all is a recruiting update, and this is actually in regards to the 2025 West Virginia football recruiting class, not the upcoming 2024 class, which will have its signing day coming up here in just a few short months in December. West Virginia already has 20 commits squared away there, but now they've got a jump start on that 25 class with the first commitment there coming through in the form of in-state wide receiver Tyshawn Dews announcing his commitment to the Mountaineers this past week. I covered this on the Country Roads webcast YouTube channel in a video, but wanted to update it here on the CRW podcast side as well, as you see here shared on the screen. In this article from Ethan Bach over on WVSportsNow.com, you can see his post there on X with his graphic and commitment announcement announcing his decision to join West Virginia and become the first member of the 2025 class as West Virginia continues to recruit in-state players in incoming classes and do a great job of locking down the top talent within the state, adding another one in 5'11", 170-pound Hurricane wide receiver Tyshawn Dews for the 2025 class. And then we have a bit of an injury update here ahead of Week 4 for the Mountaineers, leading it off with the most unfortunate of those injury updates, and that, of course, is what we feared we may hear about West Virginia cornerback Montre Miller, as you see detailed here by Mike Asti over on WVSportsNow.com, and it has been confirmed Montre Miller will miss the remainder of the 2023 season as he will have surgery. This was set to be Miller's final season of collegiate football, so he will now have to seek a waiver from the NCAA in order to play football again. So hopefully the NCAA is forgiving. He certainly appears to have a good case with this injury and not getting a chance to play here, really. So hopefully they are lenient and we do get to see Montre Miller have that waiver accepted and we see him eventually down the line for the Mountaineers. Other injury news, of course, Garrett Green, we know it's an ankle injury that he's dealing with. From the sounds of things, it does not sound like he will be able to go this weekend and maybe out for a week or two for the Mountaineers. So we're proceeding ahead, assuming that Nico Marchiol will be the starting quarterback for the Mountaineers coming up in this game against Texas Tech, with most likely true freshman Sean Boyle serving as the backup until Garrett Green's ready to go. You don't want to put him out there before he's 100% as he continues to nurse that ankle injury. We saw E.J. Horton and Asani Redwood make their returns in the game against Pittsburgh. They're both back from injury, as is Traylon Ray. They're continuing to make their way towards 100%. Justin Johnson remains questionable, according to Neil Brown in his press conference this week. And then lastly, seen in street clothes during the game against Pittsburgh on the sideline, Davis Mallinger and Tyreek Austin Cave both remain unavailable for the Mountaineers for the time being. And then lastly, to wrap up the Mountaineer news segment here on Season 6, Episode 167, just wanted to detail the most recent game time announcement for the next West Virginia football game that will be coming up following this contest against Texas Tech. And that, of course, is a road tilt for the Mountaineers as they'll hit the road to head to Fort Worth on September 30th. And the West Virginia Mountaineers will play another night game, albeit being a visiting team in this one. They will have an 8 o'clock p.m. kick there on ESPN2 for that game against TCU. So there you have it, Mountaineer Nation, an update on some West Virginia football recruiting news, some injuries within the program, and the latest game time announcement for the upcoming game against TCU that will wrap up the month of September. But before we get to that contest, we've got one more at home to deal with, and that is, of course, with those pesky Texas Tech Red Raiders that we're looking to finally see West Virginia be able to defeat. So let's find out if Steven and I think they will be able to do so, and just how those matchups are looking for the Mountaineers in this Big 12 conference opener as West Virginia gets set to take on Texas Tech in Game 4 of the 2023 WVU football season. All right, Mountaineer Nation, here we are for our main segment here on episode 167 of the CRW podcast. And joining me for this main segment, where we're going to break down the matchups for West Virginia in this Big 12 conference opener against Texas Tech, preview things for the West Virginia offense against the Red Raider defense, vice versa, provide our key to victory and score predictions, and then we'll take a look around the Big 12. Joining me to help me do all of those things, of course, my co-host here on the CRW, Steven. What's going on, brother?
How's it going, everybody?
All right, man. So here we are. Yet again, Texas Tech lines up on West Virginia's schedule. We know the struggles they've had under Neil Brown have yet to defeat this Red Raider club. West Virginia has won 2 games in a row. So not only would this victory be the first win for Neil Brown over Texas Tech, it could also mark the first time he's won 3 games in a row as the West Virginia head football coach. Looking ahead into this game, Steven, before we get into the matchup specifically, what are you kind of thinking just on the forefront of your mind with this matchup with Texas Tech? I mean, I think it's another important one. I don't know if it's as big as last week was, but it's certainly, very important for Neil Brown and for this season moving forward, I think.
Yeah, I think that it's very pivotal for Neil Brown because of the 2 things that you mentioned. He's never won 3 games in a row, and he's never beaten Texas Tech. I know that on paper this one looks it's kind of weird because on paper, if you just look at the stat sheet, Texas Tech has done significantly better than West Virginia in a lot of areas, but they've only they just won their first game against Tarleton State, if I'm not mistaken. I think a lot of people had the Red Raiders doing a lot better than the way that they've started out of the gate. But I think that is to be taken with a grain of salt. I think the Red Raiders are a lot better than what that record shows right now. And I'll get a little bit more into that in a little bit, but I'll start off by saying I don't really like West Virginia's chances too much in this game. I'll be really, really honest.
It's hard not to feel that way with West Virginia's struggles in recent years with Texas Tech. It just seems like a bad matchup for the Mountaineers. Their style of play doesn't align with what West Virginia wants to do defensively. Makes it hard for West Virginia to substitute Texas Tech yet again is moving the ball at a rapid rate this season, using a fast tempo on offense, snapping the ball once nearly every 20 seconds. So that fast-paced offense has returned yet again for this Texas Tech team, and hopefully West Virginia is more prepared for it this time. We know they spent a lot of time doing so throughout this offseason. They said they've spent a lot of time preparing for this Texas Tech team, so hopefully the proof's in the pudding and it shows up on Saturday. But like you said, Steven, Texas Tech comes into this game with only one win so far in the season. They're 1-2. West Virginia 2-1. Going to be the Big 12 opener for both clubs. It's going to be September 23rd, of course, in Morgantown. It's going to be a gold rush there. As you can see, a little bit more gold lights turned on in the background behind me, a little bit more gold on the whiteboard. I got all gold going on. I even got my gold shaker from the backyard brawl last week, man. It's golded out over here. When I heard gold rush, I'm all for it. I had to show up in my gold too for the preview podcast because, I'm a big fan of the gold. So Gold Rush, and it's Hall of Fame weekend. We're going to get to see Bruce Irvin get inducted into the West Virginia Sports Hall of Fame. So wanted to shout those things out for sure.
Yeah. Bruce. Yeah.
Bruce.
Excited for my guy.
What a monster he was, man. Would love to have his pass rushing in addition to the great defensive line we've already got.
Yeah, no doubt. But yeah, getting into Texas Tech, I don't know, man. Tyler Shaw can sling it. I was watching their game a little bit earlier. I was watching the highlights of them in Oregon because, Tarleton State's only you're only going to see so much of what they got against them. So I went back and watched the game against Oregon, and, Oregon's a talented football team, and they did take them down to the wire. But I don't know, man. I don't know. We'll see what West Virginia can do against a better quarterback. That's for sure.
Better quarterback, best passing attack they faced yet, maybe. I know Drew Aller really hurt them, but, that was also when we were talking about West Virginia was utilizing a game plan to almost sell out to stop the run and try and make that young quarterback beat them. And, he was really more than capable. Unfortunately, West Virginia utilized a similar game plan, I think, when they played Pittsburgh. Obviously, we talked about the struggles of, Dracovic in that game. So certainly I think Tyler Shuck, however you pronounce his name, is going to be a big test for West Virginia. And then also, let's not rule out Baron Morton getting in on the action. Shuck has done some good things, over 700 passing yards and 7 touchdowns, but he's also thrown 4 interceptions through Texas Tech's first 3 games. So some of their fans have been clamoring for a quarterback change. And for West Virginia, I think that is maybe the worst possible news we can hear when we're talking about this matchup with Texas Tech, because West Virginia has struggled against this Texas Tech offenses over these past 4 years. And surprisingly enough, each of those 4 years that Neil Brown has played Texas Tech, they've been playing a backup quarterback. Let's start back in 2019. Jet Duffy was in the backup quarterback for the Red Raiders in that game, beat West Virginia 30-17. He threw for 354 yards and a touchdown. Then they had Henry Columbia back up in 2020, 169 yards and a touchdown, added 40 yards rushing and another touchdown in a 34-27 win for Texas Tech. Then he was in actually the next year yet again. West Virginia coincidentally had to face him, the backup quarterback Columbia, 266 yards in that game in a 23-20 win. And then the aforementioned Baron Morton, who's currently the backup for Texas Tech now, that a lot of the Red Raider fans are clamoring for. He got into the game against West Virginia last season, and we know that the Red Raiders absolutely torched West Virginia 48-10 in that game. Morton played awesome, 325 yards and 2 touchdowns. And according to PFF, Steven, the fans might have a little bit of a case. Morton hasn't played a ton this season. He's only played 26 snaps, but in his 26 snaps, he has an 80.2 offensive grade with a 79.7 passer rating compared to Tyler Shuck's 66.5 offensive grade and 57.8 pass grade there on PFF. So I don't know. I hope West Virginia doesn't have to deal with the Texas Tech backup quarterback again, but it's certainly looking like we may have to deal with that, unfortunately, being a possibility in this game again.
Yeah, that's it might be the case. You never know. I think either way, our secondary is going to have to show up because I don't know. I have a little bit of faith in this run defense. We was talking about that on the post game show for the the backyard brawl. We've got numbers and depth on our defensive line, and I think that our linebacking core is pretty strong too. I think it's our secondary that I really get concerned about going into this one because it's one thing to to face a quarterback like Djokovic. But I'm telling you, even though Tyler Shaw's thrown 4 interceptions, I watched the game against Oregon. Some of those interceptions aren't totally on him. Like receivers, I don't know their offense, but I'm saying like it's not always on the quarterback. So we may still be facing this kid. And I'm telling you, he's thrown over 700 yards already. He can sling that rock.
Yeah, and that's one thing Texas Tech's going to do. They're going to come out, they're going to pass the football. Zach Kitley, their offensive coordinator, has done a great job with passing offenses every year since he's been in college football. I mean, go back, Houston Baptist, him and Bailey Zappi lighting it up. They go to Western Kentucky together, set, NCAA records passing wise. Texas Tech led the Big 12 in passing yardage last season. So, although this season, they haven't done as good as you'd expect, it's still better than most teams. They've scored 30 plus in every game. They've put up 400 plus yards in every game, I believe, and especially against even in their 2 losses against Oregon and Wyoming, they put up over 400 yards of total offense. So it's an offense that can move the ball, and West Virginia is going to have to be on their P's and Q's, despite the fact that some Red Raider fans are a little bit hasty with these struggles, because it's not, I guess, up to par with what they saw last season. And this is a Red Raider team with a ton of super seniors, so they were expecting a little bit more than what they've gotten through these first 3 games of the season, I believe. But having said that, there's certainly a lot of weapons on that Texas Tech offense. You mentioned West Virginia's run defense being stout. I think they're going to have to continue to do that in this game, and they're going to be tested. Another great running back. West Virginia's faced, some good ones already. Hammond last week for Pitt. And then, of course, early in the season, they faced both Katron Allen and Nick Singleton and did a good job against those great Penn State backs. But Neil Brown talked about, even in his press conference, that he feels like Taj Brooks is one of the most underrated running backs in the conference and maybe even in the country. And he certainly looked it against West Virginia in his recent appearances. He's averaging over 7 yards per carry this season. And last year against the Mountaineers, he ran for 107 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he's hurt West Virginia in the past. West Virginia's run defense hopefully continues to look improved as they have thus far throughout this season, as you mentioned there, Stephen. And then the Texas Tech wide receivers, they have weapons there. I was listening to a Red Raider podcast earlier today, and they did mention that they have had an issue with drops and pass protection. So like you said, it's not all on Shuck, but there are some good receivers there. Jorden Bradley currently leads them in receiving yards, and Miles Price leads them in touchdowns. Price is also a weapon for them on special teams. Big body receiver, tough to tackle after the catch. He gets yards after the catch. And then let's not forget they also return Xavier White, who's now a senior. He absolutely hurt the Mountaineers a lot last year. 8 catches, 139 yards, and a touchdown in that big, easy win they had over West Virginia in a rout. So, just looking at this matchup, Texas Tech's offense against West Virginia's defense, I think, I agree with you. West Virginia's run defense has been strong enough. We've talked a lot about the linebacker and then linebacking core and the defensive line, how they've really, exceeded expectations, I think, in a lot of ways, and have looked very good in the trenches. So I think West Virginia's run defense is going to come to play. They're going to be motivated. This is where we find out a lot about the West Virginia secondary. They certainly improved a ton last week from what they had shown earlier. We knew the coverage adjustments that the coaching staff had talked about that they were going to utilize in that Pittsburgh game. They just didn't want to put on film against Duquesne, and it really helped the Mountaineers a lot. West Virginia's coverage grade against Penn State was a 41.8 on PFF. Against Duquesne, it was a 56.2. And then you see against Pittsburgh, it jumps all the way up to 81.2. So that Pittsburgh passing offense left a little bit to be desired, under 100 passing yards. Like we said, Tyler Shuck going to be more of a challenge. My question is, Stephen, do you think Malachi Ruffin and Beanie Bishop can continue their great performances that they've shown last week against Pittsburgh? Both of them very highly rated, 2 of the top rated corners in the Big 12 right now on PFF after that performance. But was it an aberration, or has the secondary truly improved? What do you think we're going to see in the matchup of Texas Tech's passing offense against this West Virginia passing defense?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't think that it's totally just up to them too. I do think that they have to show up, but they have. It's not just Miles Price that we're really having to worry about. They've got 2 really good other receivers, in Jaron Brantley and Jorden Brown, that I really think that we're really going to have to do a good job of managing. And so Malachi Ruffin and Beanie Bishop have got to show up. But we're going to have some help from the surrounding core, I guess, to help keep those guys managed, because I don't think I can't remember what the number was on the Pitt game, but I don't think that they threw it for over 15 times. No, I think they threw it for 20, but they didn't connect on very many.
I think he only completed like 8 passes, though. I think it was like 8 for 20, if I'm not mistaken.
That's what it was. I would bet you, I'd be willing to bet that Tyler Shaw's going to at least sling it 30 to 35 times in this football game.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So we got to come to play. So on the forefront, I'm not confident. I'm just being honest. Just for what I've seen from our secondary in previous games, I want to think that it's fixed after one game. But with it being such a bad opponent, I'm sorry, but it really truly was. With it being such a bad opponent, I really can't gauge anything off of that. Now, with that being said, if they come out this week and they show the same type of defense that they showed last week, I'll probably change my tune a little bit.
I understand. I get what you're coming from. We know the secondary had been, the question mark prior to last week. And I mentioned, ahead of the Pittsburgh game that it would be a good barometer of if the secondary had improved. And I think it showed that they had a little bit, because that was due to the fact that I knew that Pittsburgh's quarterback had struggled. And so I knew if he came out and looked like a world beater, we would really be in trouble in the secondary. But the fact that he continued to struggle against West Virginia, I think at least shows that our secondary is, marginally better than it was last season. The, thing that we have to find out is just how much better exactly they are. And here in Big 12 play, we're going to find that out, especially when they're going to be facing, like we said, more fast-paced offenses beginning here with Texas Tech. But I think the next 3 teams they play are all going to be that way when you follow it up with TCU and Houston. So they're going to be tested with tempo. They're going to be able to have to get set and, be on their keys, have their calls right, and get lined up, because that's one thing that's hurt West Virginia recently. I think if they do a better job of that, then I like their chances overall better, because they've done a much better job at fundamentals this season, just straight up tackling and doing those little things. So hopefully if they do that, it will lead to a better performance for the secondary in this game. But I think if West Virginia is going to, not struggle in that area and not get absolutely torched by this Texas Tech passing offense, and it looked like it did last season, they're going to have to be opportunistic and force some turnovers, something that they seem to have turned a corner doing this season. So that's what I'm hoping to see. Maybe we see Aubrey Burks, Marcus Floyd, Anthony Wilson, Beanie Bishop, Malachi Ruffin, any one of those guys jump in there, get another interception or 2 in this game, and it could really be a huge difference maker.
Yeah, I think Beanie Bishop, obviously we've talked about him pretty much every show this season, but I think Aubrey Burks has a chance to really, ignite himself in this game. If he can get another pick in this one, I think that would really boost himself.
Well, and that's the good thing we do have going for us, is that it's at home again. The crowd's probably going to be great yet again. And after that game against Pittsburgh, a lot of that momentum should carry over. The team really fed off that energy. Hopefully they're able to do it again. And the secondary should have really high confidence right now following that performance. So that's something that's, they got going in their favor as well. So we're kind of in wait and see mode in regards to the matchup with the West Virginia defense and the Texas Tech offense. We think West Virginia do a better job of stopping Taj Brooks in that Texas Tech rushing game. But, the matchup in the passing game is certainly the question mark, and we'll see how that turns out. But, Stephen, let's flip it over to the other side and talk about the West Virginia offense against the Texas Tech defense. And, of course, heading up that Red Raider defense yet again this season is Tim DeRuyter, returning as the defensive coordinator for Texas Tech. However, it yet again, we've talked about that 1-2 record, with the only win right now being over an FCS program. So that's why there's a lot of negative things surrounding, the storylines of this Texas Tech team. But the defense is underperforming to what we have seen in past seasons. I don't know if that will, continue to be the case when they match up with West Virginia. Let's hope so that is the case. But as of right now, they've certainly in recent seasons been very good because of their defensive line play. They've been able to stuff the run, and that's really helped them a lot and led to some of their success last season to go with that really high-powered offense that they have. But thus far this season, they've struggled a little bit in those areas. They've given up over 100 rushing yards to every team they've played thus far this season, 171 in the loss to Wyoming. The lowest amount they allowed was 113 versus Oregon, so they kind of got back on track there, but Oregon was able to pass for 359 yards to find a way to win that game. And then most recently in that FCS matchup, Tarleton State only managed 3 points, but they did run for 145 yards on 36 carries and averaged 4 yards per carry. So for West Virginia team that is, predominantly run based this season, that's one thing that, you could look at in this matchup, and maybe West Virginia could find an advantage there. And you got to hope that that could be something that swings this for West Virginia, and maybe they're finally able to get over that hump, because looking back at past games, I wanted to find out why has West Virginia struggled against this Texas Tech team. And there's a multitude of reasons, but for me, rushing struggles for West Virginia is up there, and that is something that they've struggled with in every matchup since Neil Brown came here in these losses to Texas Tech. Going back to 2019, they only ran for 51 yards against the Red Raiders. 2020, only 91 yards rushing. 2021, 94 yards rushing on 27 carries. And then last year, they only managed to rush for 73 yards against Texas Tech. So in the past 4 years, Neil Brown, as we talked about, 0-4 against Texas Tech, and the Mountaineers have never ran for over 100 yards as a team against the Red Raiders. Got to think that's going to change this season, hopefully. And if it does, it's got to improve West Virginia's chances. But what do you think about this West Virginia offense against this Texas Tech defense? And do they have a chance to right that wrong and get the run game going finally against the Red Raiders this season, you think, Stephen?
You got to think so, right? With the offensive line, the way that it's been, built, and with CJ running the way that he's been running. Well, not just CJ, but Jaheim and Jalen also. You got to think that it's, if anything, going to be flip flopped, and that we're going to struggle with the pass. But I really hope that we come out and we're a little bit more aggressive with the run, or with the pass. I mean, I like that we can run the ball, but I just don't think that we're going to be able to run the ball, score enough points to be able to hang with them, because they're going to score points.
Definitely going to have to put more drives together, manufacture more points somehow. And like I said, this Texas Tech team has scored 30 plus in every game they've played thus far this season. So that's something that makes you worry. However, like I said, the defensive struggles have been there for this Red Raiders team. Currently coming into this game, they're next to last in the Big 12 conference in both points allowed and total yards allowed. So, if West Virginia is going to find their footing offensively, maybe it's this matchup against Texas Tech that allows them to do so, especially coming at home. And then, let's not forget Nico Marchiol. We're expecting him to, be the starter for the Mountaineers in this game, not expecting Garrett Green to be available. Most likely, true freshman Sean Boyle will serve as your backup there. He's getting a 25% of the reps in practice this week just in case. But Nico Marchiol, he's made 2 appearances for West Virginia, once last season as a true freshman, and then once this season, of course, last week getting the backyard brawl win as a redshirt freshman. But in both those games, he was thrust into action after preparing as the backup for a whole week. So this is going to be the first time we get to see Nico Marchiol with a full week preparing as the starter. And maybe we see some different things offensively because of that. And some things really do open up because he does have some different skill sets than what GG brought to the table. And so maybe that leads to some more success offensively that we haven't seen yet. Who knows?
Yeah, and one thing that I wanted to point out too was I think that, after going back and watching the game, I really think that, I know that this is going to sound weird because we don't really talk about it that often, but I really think that Neil Brown did a great job of scheming up on Pitt last week, because he was throwing things out there in motion that was throwing their defense off the whole time.
Yeah.
You could see it in their linebackers. They would shift, and you'd see the confusion, and they wouldn't know which way to go as soon as the ball was snapped. And so that was why West Virginia was largely able to run the ball that effectively last Saturday, was because they confused their linebacking core so much all game long. And so if they can do a good job of that with the Texas Tech linebacking core, I think that we'll be able to run the ball effectively, as effectively, if not better, than what we have all season. But I think it should open it up over the middle for our passing game, because I think it's no question that Nico has a good arm, but I don't think that we've gotten truly to see how good that arm is. Everybody talks about Garrett Green. Nico was recruited for his arm. You know what I mean? He's
Yeah,
recruited as a dual
absolutely.
threat for sure. But I mean, from everything I've seen in high school, the kid's got a great arm.
Yeah, and you've seen flashes of it, against Pitt, but I think it's just tip of the iceberg to what we will see moving forward from Nico, I think, with his passing abilities. And hopefully he's able to show a little bit of that off in this game against Texas Tech because, as you said, West Virginia are going to need to put up, more yards and probably more points than they have, especially against their Power 5 competition thus far this season, as they only had, 15 points against Penn State, 17 against Pitt. So going to need more than that to beat this Texas Tech team. Certainly going to probably at least have to get into the 20s if you want to do that. But as far as the Texas Tech defense, some standout players to watch there. Linebacker Josiah Pierre leads the team in tackles. He's a senior. There's absolutely a ton of seniors on this Texas Tech team, a lot of super seniors. Another senior, Miles Cole, edge rusher, great pass rusher. Watch out for him in when West Virginia does have to drop back in this game. And then a couple senior defensive backs as well. Dunlap has 2 picks to lead them. And then Taylor Demerson, 2 pass breakups, 1 interception, and is second on the team in tackles. But, one other thing I wanted to mention in regards to West Virginia's offense, Stephen, was that here's a little stat that I got for you. There's currently only 6 teams in the country who are averaging at least 175 passing yards per game,
I know the stat you're about to throw out.
200 rushing yards per game, and have thrown 0 interceptions. Those teams are Duke, Liberty, Notre Dame, Oregon.
Penn State and West Virginia.
Exactly. Our Mountaineers are the 6th team there. So
Yep.
for all, the woe is me stuff we've been hearing about the West Virginia offense, they are still doing some good things that, maybe are flying a little bit under the radar. As I think this West Virginia team may be flying a little bit under the radar, but that's just the way we like it.
You know what? I think you're right about that. And as harsh as we've been on this offense, well, not really. I don't know if we've been harsh on the offense. We've been really harsh on the secondary, but we haven't been so easy on the offense, I don't guess. But people can say what they want about the play calling and this and that, but if it's one thing that I want to commend Neil Brown for this season is we have played some very disciplined football thus far, against some pretty good competition in Penn State. I think that we've done a great job of, last year, the past several years anyway, we've seen a lot of undisciplined penalties, whether it be like a false start with a third and short situation, or a 4th and short situation, or something silly like that, or an after the play. You have guys with extracurricular activities a lot of times out of frustration, I guess. We haven't seen that. You don't see turnovers from the offense. I know that Nico had the one Saturday night, but you could tell that it wasn't something that is going to be a problem in the future. I'll say that. So I do want to just commend them for being disciplined and taking care of the ball and playing fundamental football, because like you mentioned earlier, they've done a great job of form tackling this year. And that's one thing that I've, really had a big gripe about is, kids not wrapping up on tackles and just going for that big hit all the time. And kids get off of like broken tackles 2 or 3 times a play. So I really like seeing that out of our both offense and defense this year.
Yeah, shout out to the coaching staff. Seems like, they talked a lot about this offseason, and we've made a lot about certain things they say and them coming true or not. But, more things that they've said, leading into the season have come true than not. I will give them credit for that. And one thing they talked about was the culture and getting things right, and this team being more disciplined, more hungry, all of those things. And I certainly thought that we had seen it through those first few games. As you mentioned there, I thought it was reflecting in us not having as many, penalties that were really costly. The turnovers that we have had haven't really hurt us that much. The turnovers against Duquesne, I think they were both kind of freak plays. As you mentioned, the one in the backyard brawl was against Duquesne. You had the punt bounce off a guy, and then you had a guy trying to dive for a touchdown, go out, have the ball go out the back of the end zone for a touchback. So really, we've taken care of the ball a lot on offense. So like you said, we've certainly been disciplined, it seemed like to my naked eye, but I wanted to do some research. So I'm glad you brought that up. I do have a stat that I looked up in regards to that. I didn't go back too far, but I just wanted to at least compare this year versus last year, because that's really what we're looking at, right here. We know last year left so much to be desired. We were really looking for a lot of improvement this season. So just looking back last season, do you know how many penalties West Virginia had in the backyard brawl alone to start last season, Stephen?
I know it was over 10.
Yeah, 11 penalties West Virginia had in the backyard brawl against Pitt last season.
I remember that was what I used as my when we go over in the post game. What stat jumps out on you in the stat sheet? That was the one that I picked. I remember that.
I thought I remembered us discussing it after the game. For sure, it was definitely an eye opener. So 11 penalties just in the first game last season against Pittsburgh, and then they would follow that up the next week with 8 against Kansas. This year, through 3 games, West Virginia has 13 penalties total. So, last year they almost had that in one game alone. So they've certainly improved it a lot. And, I'll go one step further. They had 5 versus Penn State, and they've had 4 each against Duquesne and Pittsburgh. So not only are they, improving year to year so far, they've pretty much improved game to game thus far this season as well. So definitely doing a better job taking care of the football and being more disciplined.
Yeah, and I would love to see what the yardage comparison on those penalties would be too, because I would be willing to bet that those 11 penalties in the backyard brawl last year were a lot more big yardage penalties as well. I remember there being a couple 15-yard penalties in there that really affected our our yardage situation and field position in that game. Well, actually, in a lot of games last year, it felt like that. And this year, even when we do get penalties, they're not big yardage penalties.
And they're not in critical situations like they have been in past
Exactly.
years also.
Right.
Yeah, it makes a big difference for sure. So, I think that's all I've got matchups wise. Steven, you got anything else you want to throw in there in regards to either side of the ball or special teams? I know we didn't dive into it too much here in discussing this preview, but I think both teams do have good special teams. It's kind of a wash there for me in that matchup. Texas Tech has good return men and a good punter, as does West Virginia, I think. But anything else you got there matchup wise you want to discuss?
No, the only thing I'll say is we have to do a better job of protecting the punter this week. It's the last 2 weeks in a row, one against Duquesne, you mentioned a minute ago that we got one blocked. It ended up being a turnover. Last week, or this couple days ago against Pitt, dangerously close, I think, on 2 or 3 occasions to getting blocked. So we've got to do a really good job of protecting Oliver Straw back there. Let him get those punts off.
Since we've dug in on the matchups a little bit, now it's time to get into our favorite part of these preview episodes, and that's our key to victory and score predictions for the Big 12 conference opener for the Mountaineers as they get set to take on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. All right, Steve, and so I'm going to let you take the wheel first on this one. Let's start it off. Key to victory for West Virginia to finally get over the hump in the Neil Brown era against Texas Tech. What's it going to take for the Mountaineers to be able to do so, in your opinion?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, I liked what we changed in our secondary last week against Pitt. Obviously 3 interceptions is a really good job by them in fixing the issues that we've been having. I didn't notice nearly as many guys being as wide open as I seen in week 1 and week 2. So I think that needs to stay the same this week. So for that reason, I think that that's got to be my key to victory. If we can continue to play well in the secondary, kind of force them to go to the run game to where we know we can shut that down, I think that we have a really, really good chance of winning the game this week.
I like that. So kind of the reverse game plan of what we used, in a couple of the games earlier this season. We want to shut down the pass and force them to run maybe and try and make Taj Brooks beat us because I think we, trust that front 7 a lot. I like that. I like that a lot. For me, I touched on it a little bit earlier. I think it's, rushing offense for West Virginia. They've got to be able to run the football against this Texas Tech team. Mentioned it when we were talking about the matchups. West Virginia has not ran for over 100 yards against Texas Tech in the Neil Brown era. Got to be able to do that if they're going to be victorious in this game. And I think they should be able to do that with, the offensive line that we think can be elite for West Virginia this season. And they've shown flashes of that. And the West Virginia run game, as we stated, has had a lot of success, averaging 200 rushing yards per game thus far through 3 games in this season. So West Virginia is going to have to continue that to be able to come out victorious against the Red Raiders. Now the question is the ultimate question here, Stephen. will they be able to indeed do that and come out victorious? Does Neil Brown find a way to win 3 games for the first time in a row at West Virginia? And the Mountaineers, finish out this 3-game homestand, winning all 3 of those in a row would really be good for the fans. The Mountaineers would have 50% of their home schedule done and all be W's in the win column if they're able to do so. But this is a tough matchup, as we've discussed already. So I don't know what you're thinking. It's kind of hard to judge. Certainly a toss-up in my eyes, but why don't you tell me, does West Virginia come out on the winning side against the Red Raiders? What's your prediction for the Big 12 opener?
Well, I really want to pick the West Virginia to win this game, but I don't have a very strong positive feeling about it. I know in our prediction round, well, I wasn't there for the prediction round table, but when I gave you guys my prediction for the score or for the schedule, so far I have been right, and so far it is pretty much aligned with what I felt like those games would go like. So for that reason, I'm gonna kind of go with what I had in that same or whenever I predicted that, and I had us losing to Texas Tech. As for the score prediction, I think West Virginia's going to have some chances down the stretch late because of it being at home and the crowd and everything. But I don't know if we're going to have enough to get it done. I think we lose 30-24.
Yeah, I understand. I see where you're coming from making that prediction. And, I was right there, along with you in the season prediction roundtable. I said, I found it hard to pick Neil Brown to beat Texas Tech until he showed me that he could do so because he had really struggled. But I think so far this season, he has shown me some things that he hasn't shown me in the past. And I've seen us, I don't know if I can exactly say turn the corner completely in some areas, but I've certainly seen some improvements in some areas that I was hoping to see. And I hope that continues in this game for the Mountaineers. It's going to be a tough one, though, Steven. So Texas Tech currently favored by 6 at the time that we're recording this. So, Vegas certainly agrees with you, but not so fast, my friend. I'm going to have to disagree. I think that West Virginia, they're motivated right now. We talked about it coming into the season, them feeling like a motivated team. I think they played like it against Pittsburgh. Hearing the stories of Neil Brown's pregame speech gave me chills. I think he's doing a great job motivating this team, saying all the right things. They were really looking forward to that game against Pittsburgh. I think in turn, they're doing the same thing with this game against Texas Tech. Neil Brown stated earlier this week they've done a lot to prepare for these guys. Hopefully that proves to be true yet again in the same way that it did against Pittsburgh. And because it paid off in the backyard brawl, I'm putting my eggs into that basket again, that it will do so, that he's able to motivate this team in the first Big 12 conference game. As we know, they were predicted last in the conference. So I think that he's able to use that for motivation, just telling them that they were picked 14th and this is their first chance to prove the doubters wrong. We talked about Neil Brown not beating Texas Tech yet, not having won 3 games in a row yet at West Virginia. Well, he has a chance to do so in this game, and it would be the 3rd consecutive home game. It's the first time West Virginia's had 3 consecutive home games in a row since 2015. So, they can go 3-0 in those games with the win here. And also just add into those motivating factors and West Virginia's ability to actually run the football this season that lead me to thinking West Virginia has a chance to win this game. Also, Joey McGuire at Texas Tech is 1-5 in true road games. That's a stat I heard today on that Texas Tech podcast as well. So all of those things combined and throwing my gold blue glasses on and wanting to provide a little wishful thinking, I think, and hope that West Virginia can start the season 3-1 and start Big 12 play 1-0. I'm riding with the Mountaineers, baby. 28-24. West Virginia finds a way to score just enough points and hold the Red Raiders just enough. Be the first team to keep them under 30 this season. And if they do that, I think they got a great chance to win. I'm going with it. 28-24. WVU gets the win.
I like it. I will say if they show up like that, I'm going to be changing my tune a little bit, and I'll change a little bit down further in the schedule where I had wins and losses later in the season. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, things start looking a lot different if West Virginia can pull off this win. And I think that's why Neil Brown mentioned in his press conference that he wanted the crowd to come out and, really provide the team energy like they did in the backyard brawl, because they feel like if they can win this game, get off to a good start in the conference, and of course, start 3-0 at home, that they feel like they can have a really successful season. So I think this game at the end of the year, we can look back and say it was a swing game into, a really good season, or it was a swing game that, left West Virginia as, kind of an average to mid-tier team. So I think it's an important game, and hopefully West Virginia finds a way to get it done.
And ironically enough, Texas Tech always seems to be that game for West Virginia. Even going back to the first year we was in the Big 12, unfortunately that swing game didn't go so well for West Virginia. Look what happened to the rest of the season. Because before that game, we were like a rocket to the sky. We were going, we were doing really, really well before that point. So, and not just that game, but ever since then, it seems like that has been somewhat of a barometer on a lot of schedules of West Virginia's. So it's kind of like poetic justice if you think about it.
Yeah, it really is, and it could be for the Mountaineers, and poetic justice for Neil Brown as well. If it was the game that really turned the tide for him, was beating Texas Tech, and that was the one that kind of finally got everybody in his corner and led to a good season and turned things around for him at West Virginia. That would certainly be poetic justice as well. But I want to close out this before we get into our Around the Big 12 segment by saying, to Mountaineer Nation, everyone was awesome Saturday night. We talked about it. Steve and Brad and I were all at the game for the backyard brawl and that electrifying atmosphere. Let's recreate that as much as possible for this Big 12 opener against Texas Tech, because it is important, for this season and for us as a fan base and for this program moving forward. So, get out for this 3:30 kick there at Mountaineer Field. Be loud yet again. Provide this team with some energy, and let's ride that out to a successful season this year for the Mountaineers.
Yeah. And West Virginia's known for its loyal fan base, so let's keep that going. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Continue that tradition. And speaking of tradition, there's certainly a lot of Big 12 conference teams with tradition involved. So let's take a look at who some of those teams will be matched up with this week in our Around the Big 12 segment here on Season 6, Episode 167 of the CRW podcast. All right, so around the Big 12 this week, Saturday, September 23rd, got a full slate of games here with all conference teams in action, most of which involved in Big 12 conference games. So let's start it off here. Oklahoma and Cincinnati, Stephen, noon kick there on Fox this week. Who are you riding with there as the Sooners travel to take on the Bearcats?
Cincinnati obviously has played fairly well. Last couple of games, getting the win over Pitt and everything. But Oklahoma just looks too darn good right now. I gotta go with the Sooners.
Yeah, I might have to agree with you there on that one. I think they're going to be a little bit too much. Cincinnati's defense has looked good, particularly their defensive line this season, but they also showed some holes last week in that upset loss to Miami of Ohio. So I think Oklahoma is certainly going to be able to expose those even more so. I'm riding with the Sooners as well. The next up, SMU and TCU, bit of a rivalry here. They're playing in Fort Worth there, noon kick. That one's going to be on Fox Sports 1. Who you taking here in this matchup, Stephen?
Don't really know too much about SMU, but I know TCU has looked a lot better since taking that loss to Colorado. I got to go with TCU.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Big 12 over the ACC, TCU.
The ACC.
I still can't not laugh.
The Southern Border Atlantic Coast Conference.
Yeah. But that's one of the few non-conference matchups here in the Big 12 this week there, and we're both riding with TCU in that one. Then we get another conference matchup here, one of the newcomers taking on the Kansas Jayhawks as BYU travels to Lawrence to face Jalen Daniels, Lance Leipold, Devin Neal, and that awesome Kansas offense. It's going to be a 3:30 game, same start as West Virginia. That game's going to be on ESPN. Who are you taking there, Jayhawks or BYU, Stephen?
I actually like the Jayhawks in this one. I'm going to say that they pull this one out. I think that they got something to prove. Last year they started off hot, obviously, coming out and beating the teams that they did. I'm not going to say which one they beat in the second game of the season because I, was at that game. But they, the Kansas Jayhawks looked a lot better, obviously last year than what they have been years past. And I think that once their quarterback Daniels went down, I think they're really took a blow to them. This year they have came out swinging. So I think that continues, and then playing at home only helps. So I'm picking Kansas.
I'm right there with you. I think that they're certainly continuing their ways of improving and climbing as they have since Lance Leipold, showed that last season. This season they look even better, and I think they continue that. They find a way to win, and they remain unbeaten on the season, in my opinion, and they get it done over BYU. Of course, we talked about the Red Raiders and Mountaineers, but just to remind you guys one more time, 3:30 kick televised on ESPN Plus. If you want to watch it there. And then Oklahoma State versus Iowa State is the next matchup we're looking at here. 4:00 kick there. It's going to be on Fox Sports 1. Both of these teams coming off of upset losses. Iowa State falling to Ohio. Oklahoma State getting absolutely shellacked by South Alabama. Oklahoma State still undecided on the quarterback. They've been playing 3 all season. Iowa State, has Rocco Beck, the son of Anthony Beck, thrust into action sooner than they wanted to due to their gambling scandal, and that's led to some struggles for them as well. But I'll go ahead and make my pick, Steven, just because it's in Ames. I think I got to give Iowa State the advantage. I'm usually a never bet against Gundy guy, but it's looking a little rough this season, so I got to go with the Cyclones in this one. What are you thinking, though?
I thought I was going to pull a fast one on you there, because I actually had the Cyclones in that one too. Because it's in Ames, and also because Anthony Beck's lineage is out there. So how can you root against the Cyclones in that one?
We're in agreement there at least. Then
Yeah.
next up, you get Sam Houston traveling to Houston to take on Houston. 7:00 kick there. That's also going to be on ESPN Plus. Dana Holgerson with Sam Houston coming to town. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to pick Houston to finally, get off their losing streak here and get a win. I don't think they'll get upset in this game, but what do you think, Steven?
Nope, go Sam, baby.
Hey,
No,
there we go.
I gotta pick. I gotta go with the Cougars in this one. But you never know. You never know. I would. I'll say this. I'll say this. Not that I want to root for Houston, but I want to root for. I want to root for Ohogie to keep his job until he gets up here. I'd love to see him come to
Right.
Morgantown and coach on that sideline next year, just for the sheer fact of the way the atmosphere is going to be.
I don't know. It's looking iffy. I'm just hoping he's going to
It's
be
looking
there when
bleak.
we go to play them on the road this year at this point.
Yeah, he might not make it to that game.
The rate it's going, it's only a couple weeks, but
He
who
loses this one,
knows?
he won't.
I was about to say that definitely they're going to need to get the win if we're going to want to see him probably, but we definitely think he'll be able to do that in that game. And then you get Texas, the red hot Texas Longhorns, of course, following wins over Alabama, and then Wyoming has to travel over to Waco to take on the Baylor Bears. 7:30 kick there. That's going to be televised on ABC. Waco's a tough place to play, Steven, but Texas is a very tough team this season. Do you think they have a chance of being upset?
No, I don't. I hate to say it, but I think Texas truly is back this year. I think that they have played a really great brand of football. And yeah, I can't pick against them in this game.
Yeah, unfortunately, I got to agree with you. I think Texas is going to be able to handle Baylor there and get it done. And they're my favorite to win the conference this year at this point. We'll see if they're able to keep it rolling, though. And lastly, to wrap up here in our Around the Big 12 segment, our game of the week this week within the conference, it's UCF traveling to Manhattan to take on Kansas State, who is coming off that tough loss to Missouri, who hit an amazing 61-yard field goal, as we talked about earlier this week. But UCF having to travel to Kansas State without John Reese Plumlee, going to be utilizing their backup quarterback yet again this week. They were able to get it done last week, but much tougher opponent this week in the Wildcats, the defending Big 12 Conference champions. It's going to be 8:00 kick on Fox Sports 1. Steven, what's your pick for our game of the week here in our Around the Big 12 segment?
Man, most interesting game on the whole slate, in my opinion. I think if they had John Reese Plumlee, I think the Knights would roll into Manhattan and really take that one, because I've been really vocal about that. I've really liked what they've got going on down there. I think they're a really good football team when he's playing. But I don't think that they're going to be able to go down to Manhattan after, what the Wildcats just had to come out of Missouri. Like you said, that 61-yard field goal, which I think was the longest field goal, you said, SEC history?
I believe so, yeah.
Somewhere in that's wild to think about. I think the Wildcats are going to come out with some vengeance, man. I think that they're going to come out and play hard. So I think I'm going to take Kansas State.
We're thinking a lot alike in a lot of these picks, and that's not going to be different here. I think not having John Reese Plumlee makes all the difference in the world. Harvey's still a good back there for UCF. They'll probably still be able to do some things offensively, and I think ultimately it'll end up being a really good game probably still in the long run, but the Little Apple there in Kansas is a tough place to play. Bill Snyder Memorial Family Stadium. There is a tough venue there for opponents to come in and try and get wins. And unfortunately, I don't think UCF's able to get it done this week without their quarterback there in Plumlee. Like you said, if he's involved, maybe a different story, but I think Kansas State finds a way to get it done as well.
Yeah, I think so too. And it kind of evens out the Big 12 a little bit more. You know what I mean?
It does.
I think the only two teams that West Virginia has left on the schedule right now that are undefeated is UCF and Oklahoma. So
interesting. So it would definitely even it out then for the Mountaineers. So we'll see what happens moving forward. Certainly going to be a very interesting Big 12 season, and we'll continue to cover it here in our Around the Big 12 segments, and we will talk about the results of these games in our next podcast episode, which will be our Texas Tech review and reaction episode there on episode 168. But having said that, Stephen, I guess that will get ready to just about put a bow on things here on episode 167 here of the CRW podcast, our Texas Tech preview and predictions edition. We've talked about some Mountaineer news, talked about the matchups, gave our key to victory and score predictions, and just talked about some games around the conference. But is there anything that we didn't discuss or touch on that you wanted to throw in here before we close it out?
Nope. I'm ready to be proven wrong. I know I predicted a loss, but I just want to see us come out and show the same things that we've shown in the past 2 weeks and show improvement. Going into conference play, that's all you can ask for, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Hopefully they're able to get conference play started the right way, finally get this win over Texas Tech that the fan base is hungry for. We talked about the fan base being very hungry for a win over Pittsburgh, needing that backyard brawl victory. I think, if there's another team that they're looking to win that's next in line, it's probably Texas Tech. They're just as hungry for a win against the Red Raiders because it's been a while since we've had one of those as well. Neil Brown has satiated our needs the past couple of times. We were hungry for a win against Pitt. He got it done. The end of last season, we were hungry for wins over Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. He got that done. Let's hope he can continue the trend and get it done against Texas Tech. Find a way to win 3 games in a row, and West Virginia move to 3-1 on the season would be very big for the Mountaineers. We're hoping to celebrate and talk about it with you guys following the game. Be sure to check us out on the West Virginia Mountaineers post-game show on the Voice of College Football channel here on YouTube and on the Big 12 Voice of College Football channel as well. Appreciate you tuning into this episode. Whether you viewed it or listened to it, you can watch the episodes on YouTube on the Country Roads webcast channel or on the WV Sports Now channel, and can find them on the web at wvsportsnow.com, where you'll find all kinds of great Mountaineer sports content. If you tuned into those video versions, hit the like button, give us a thumbs up before you head out. It really helps not only this video's performance, but future videos performances as well. And if you're a West Virginia fan, be sure and subscribe. Helps us and it helps you, as it helps get more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation. But we appreciate you listeners to the audio version as well. That can be found on any podcast platform you like: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, you name it. Just search Country Roads Webcast and you can find us there. Leave us a rating and review. That helps, and share us around with other Mountaineer fans you may know. Find us on social media: Country Roads Webcast on Facebook and Instagram, at WVU Country Roads on X/Twitter. Hopefully we're back to talk about a Mountaineer victory on episode 168. Looking forward to doing so with my co-host Steven. And for him, as always, I'm Jorden Cruz. And until next time, let's go Mountaineer.
If you really want to know, then come on, let's go. Take a stroll down those